Hey everybody, this is Eric from BuzzSumo. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're all enjoying your week. Things are going well. I can't believe we're already halfway through another week. Seems like the summer is just flying by. I'm looking forward to this. We are going to go through some content research strategies in BuzzSumo. The session is going to be pretty targeted around technically how to do search in BuzzSumo. My feeling is that if you are really able to master the various search operators, which tools you should use depending on your use case or the goal or the problem that you're trying to solve, it'll really unlock the entire platform for you. So it's going to be pretty pretty targeted session today. Not a lot of talk about, this is not a session where we're going to talk about theory about why content research and share a lot of data numbers. This is really going to be about kind of actionable strategies. The session should last about 30 to 35 minutes. It depends on the number of questions. Looks like we've got some people that are still going to be joining. Maybe they're running a few minutes late. So it's going to go quiet here for just a moment while I set a few things up and give them a chance to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Really looking forward to it. All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. Looks like I got a small group of people today, but that's good. That means hopefully I'll get a chance to answer more of your questions. For those that just joined, my name is Eric. I head the customer success team here at BuzzSumo. If anybody wants to give me a thumbs up or a raised hand or just a shout in the chat window that you can hear me, that would be great. Let me go ahead and turn my screen share on. And we'll go ahead and get started. For those, again, that just joined a little bit late, the session today should last about 30 to 35 minutes. We want to try to deal in more actionable strategies, exactly how to kind of do certain things in BuzzSumo to uncover various topic ideas, research ideas, content ideas, whether you're looking to analyze contents to improve your own, or you're looking to just find good content to curate. I think that is also a challenge these days. And how do you find the right stories to complement the work that you're doing to build up a hub of information for your audience on your social channels? So we'll kind of touch on that as well. All right, my screen share is on, so you should be able to see it now. Hopefully you're looking at the BuzzSumo app. We're going to kind of quickly jump into just a few quick kind of bullet points to get started with. That's me. We don't need to keep looking at me. Before we get into strategies itself, I think it's helpful to actually frame how to think about BuzzSumo. A lot of people come to BuzzSumo having heard about us from colleagues, from thought leaders in the space, from podcasts they listen to. And everybody always says, I use BuzzSumo for X, or it's really good for why. And I like to boil that down to what exactly is BuzzSumo? How does it work? How is it fundamentally designed? And this is, I think, the best way to think about it as a discovery platform. It's a way for you to find content that drives engagement. And then it's a way for you to find the people that are helping to drive that engagement by sharing that content with their audiences. That essentially means that BuzzSumo is a search tool. Much like any other search tool that we all use in our daily lives, the goal is to find the most relevant content for whatever it is that we've put into the search bar. The search tool model underlies the entire platform. It doesn't matter whether you're looking for content or influencers or even that you're just actually doing something more like brand monitoring. And for some of you might be using PR tools or doing some sort of share of voice reporting to see where your client or your own brand is getting mentioned. That too is a kind of search. It's just, talked about and messaged differently. But underneath it all, it's all about search, finding content based on the terms that you're looking for. Today, we're primarily going to focus on the content piece. This is the most useful process that I've found for how to start thinking about the way you should approach search in BuzzSumo. Broad, narrow filter, and then horizontal expansion. Before we pick this apart, I want to go into the platform and I want to first talk about which tools you should use depending on the type of content research you're trying to do. In BuzzSumo, there are a series of tools that map to different kinds of content work. Maybe you're just starting the process and you're trying to generate ideas for the content that you should write or the content that you should share, and so on. Maybe you've taken on a new client in an industry that you're not familiar with. So you're trying to get a sense of what is it that people are interested, what are the topics and the terms that people use in this industry. Let's call all of that work discovery or brainstorming or ideation. Just starting to build a list of ideas that we could use to eventually search for content. The other kind of work that you could do when researching content is more analysis. You've already identified the terms, the topics, the industries that you're trying to dig into, but now you actually start to need to pull out insights. You want to look at large data sets and get a sense of trends over time, formats that work, and so on. Let's call all of those tools research and analysis. Ideation, discovery, research and analysis. And then let's kind of bolt on a third category and call that like text analysis, granular keyword identification. So those are your kind of three major content research use cases. I'm sure that you all have your own kind of ways that something falls maybe in between those or straddles the two, but most use cases kind of fall under one of those three needs. The first bucket, this discovery bucket, there are three specific tools that you should potentially leverage for that work. Topic Explorer, Question Analyzer, and Trending. Now, these three tools are really designed around helping you break out of your current way of thinking, to expand the net, I guess, cast a wider net over the content that is resonating in your industry that might be different from what your initial thoughts are. But maybe you already know, and this is just a way to get confirmation. But these three tools are, the more of the focus is on helping you generate ideas. So in the Topic Explorer, most of what you're going to be doing across these three categories is this first step of the search process, thinking broad. We want to use these three discovery tools to generate as many ideas as possible. Let's kind of take any example. Let's say well, BuzzSumo works in the content marketing space. So let's take our big, broad topic as content marketing. We probably go even broader and just say marketing. But we'll kind of go one step down because we know what we focus on here at BuzzSumo. So by putting content marketing into the topic explorer, BuzzSumo starts to crawl through all of our existing databases and uncover other types of terms we should potentially look at. Terms that other content creators are using, terms that our potential audience are using when they ask questions. And this will enable us to maybe pivot our thinking beyond just this one phrase that we are tied to. So we see all these other kind of topics that are related to content marketing that people use a lot. In some cases, they are actually side by side. How to use Google Analytics to improve your content marketing strategy. What a great way to kind of target in a valuable piece of content that tackles a very specific problem that, let's face it, a lot of us marketers have. How do we actually use content marketing in the context of our website and our SEO and our traffic? So people talk about content strategy, like content marketing. You have to have a strategy behind it to execute it. Writing comes up a lot. How to build an editorial calendar, how to do email marketing. All of these things are related. Some as a subtopic, some as kind of tangential topics, some as synonyms to our initial topic. So you can see that we've started to build our coverage of the entire category. Staying broad, but jumping into the question analyzer tool, we kind of dig more fully into those forums that BuzzSumo indexes. Here we're going right at consumer insights. What are the questions that people are asking on a regular basis? Asking a lot about strategy and SEO. So we can see how starting with topics, looking at questions, we start to build this picture of if we're going to create something in the content marketing space, maybe we need to be looking at the intersection of content marketing and SEO or Google Analytics, which again are kind of all related. We're setting ourselves up down the line for potential success or narratives when it comes to create the blog. But for the moment, we're just kind of gathering information. Now, trending is another way for us to kind of see what's, ways to brainstorm. This maybe is a little bit of a different kind of discovery. Will there be trending stuff about content marketing? Sure, there might be. Probably, though, what I'm more interested in, just what's kind of like trending in my industry. If I'm working for clients in the marketing space, maybe I want to kind of pull out like a marketing trending feed and see what our potential audience are sharing right now. What's been published just in the past couple of hours that is resonating with audiences. So you can kind of see using these three tools, it's all about broadening our perspective and generating ideas. Now, once we have thought broad, once we've established our terms, now we go into this second step, which is narrowing and filtering. Every topic that you look at needs to start broad in BuzzSumo. I know that there are other approaches, especially if you use keyword tools, you actually are trying to start at the bottom, right? Like you're trying to find a lot of different long tail keywords that you can rank for. So you kind of build up the pyramid from the ground. But in BuzzSumo, the goal is actually to start with the pillar of content, thinking broadly about the entire category that you work in, and then narrowing from there. Now we start to move into our second bucket of tools, which is research and analysis. The three tools that you can use to do that work are Content Analyzer, Facebook Analyzer, and backlinks. When you jump into the research and analysis process, you want to carry over any of the ideas that you generated from the initial round of discovery in topics and questions. So we were looking at content marketing, right? So content marketing is a good broad term to start with. So we'll kind of stay broad here for the moment. And now we'll kind of analyze the data set. And what we get out of this is we start to get big sets of data for articles or content that match our term. You can see now the focus shifts just from thinking about other terms and starts to get into more identifying the right kinds of data. Are the content sources that we're tracking here, the articles, the posts, are they relevant to the type of content we would create? And is the data set large? If I could give you one piece of advice about analyzing historical data to inform the content that you create, the larger the data set, the better. Just like running a survey or taking a poll, the smaller your data set, the more variability or the less reliable the results are. You wouldn't interview two people and then write an article about their best restaurant in Chicago. You would try to gather as many points of view and data as you possibly could before presenting your analysis. And the same is true here. Having a data set of 32,000 plus articles about the topic of content marketing over the past year is pretty good. But part of why we want to think broad is because we want to try to get the data set as large as possible. But we also know that there may be content in this initial data set that doesn't really touch on what we're trying to do. Maybe we're not really focused on social media. Maybe we're actually really, based on what the topic suggested for us, we want to kind of focus in on SEO or Google Analytics. So now we can take step 2, which is narrowing and filtering. So I'll start to add terms like SEO. Now watch as my data set shifts in 2 ways. Number 1, you can see how the data becomes much, much more targeted on SEO. The intersection between content marketing and SEO. But you can also see that the data set gets really a lot smaller. We've defined a more narrow set of criteria. And that's where step 3 comes in, which is to expand horizontally. This is now where we pull back in all of the great stuff that we learned from the Topic Explorer, and we start to build a search query to expand our database again. You can see that I'm using a type of operator here. I'm using OR to look for multiple terms at the same time. Now I'll show you here, we'll look at a slide here in a moment about some kind of basic tips, but you can kind of see what I've done. Most of the content, in fact, pretty much all of the content I'm looking at here is still highly relevant to the type of content that I would want to create. But I've also tripled the size of my data set. That's the game we're playing here. We start broad so that we get a lay of the entire landscape. We narrow and filter if we need to hyper-target our results. But we don't want to go so narrow that we now have no data points on which to base an analysis. So at that point, we need to expand horizontally, pulling in synonyms, other terminology, etc. This process of broad to narrow and then broad again is really the key to unlocking content in BuzzSumo. If I started too narrow, I might wind up with something like this. 2 results. It's very difficult to know at this point what data I might be missing based on my terms. Maybe I'm really just looking for content marketing agencies in Ohio, and so this is what I get. But if my goal was to sort of like find out content marketing, content that had been produced about this topic that had worked really well, and I wanted to try to, hyper target it at some point, I still probably need to start broad and narrow rather than the other way around. Much, much easier to refine than it is to build up from the ground. Sometimes this process will be very straightforward. For BuzzSumo, we might decide not to do anything more narrowing and filtering. A search for content marketing might be perfect. Maybe we don't know the type of content we want to create yet, so we want to pull as much of it in as we can. And we want to keep it really broad. We don't want to specify down to content marketing only for SEO purposes. So we want huge, huge results. I'll give you another example. Maybe I'm really interested in every type of content produced in the big data space. No matter if it's in a different industry or not, it's useful to know what type of content works well for this topic. But yes, at some point or another, it might be interesting for you to narrow it down to the specific industry that you work in, and then figure out how to expand it horizontally. Now, I want to just really quickly show this graphic, talking about why to approach it from a pillar perspective. We don't need to kind of dig into all the bullets here, but basically this approach to using a broad pillar topic that all of your content is structured around isn't just good for using to search in BuzzSumo. It's also a great way to approach how you structure and index your entire site. It helps you better plan when to produce what you produce. It creates a more seamless way for users to navigate between pieces of content on your site. I mean, we all kind of chase bounce rates, and we all are trying to keep people on our site as long as possible so that we can really educate them about what our products and services have to offer. And so we don't want them to hit an article and then leave right away. We want them to explore one piece of content, have that go to something else, keep them on, keep them reading, keep them engaged. It also will improve your search rankings. As search engines start to identify you as an authority on an entire topic rather than just single keywords, you will notice a much, much bigger lift in your authority. To recap some of the things that we just kind of did. When you're in the research and analysis stage, so this second kind of buckets of things, you are still starting broad. You're thinking about titles, thinking about topics, not long tail keywords. You want to think about, is an article written about this topic? As you noticed, I always try to design my search first. In fact, in a couple of these examples, I didn't even mess with the filters at all. I just focused on designing a good search. Think about that as, I don't know if any of you are bakers or like to cook, but I often think about it as like baking a cake. If you bake a really good cake, it's well done, before you even decorate it, that cake is going to be good. Now, decorating it, frosting it, dressing it up, it can improve a good cake. It can make it look nicer. It can maybe even, add that extra level of taste on top. But if the cake itself is baked really well, it's still going to taste good, even if you mess up the design. But if you bake a bad cake, if it's overbaked or underbaked, and then you try to dress it up with some nice decorations, the cake still isn't going to taste good no matter how great it looks. Your filters are like your decorations. They can improve a good search, but they can't necessarily improve a badly designed search. Once I've got a good kind of search in place here, now I can start to experiment. For those of you that are looking to curate content, obviously the first kind of filter you might explore is a date range. What's been written on these topics over the past week, so I can understand what's driving engagement right now. Or perhaps you work in the B2B space and you want to understand more of like what resonates with that community. Maybe I'll put a filter on that only pulls results from more business-centric websites. Maybe I need to do some language filtering. Maybe I want to focus on a particular type of content. Or maybe, and this is especially true if you're working in the consumer space, maybe I'm looking at things related to fashion or sports or entertainment, but I don't want to focus on YouTube. Maybe I will filter out or exclude any results that come from, YouTube or other kinds of big sports publishers. You get the idea. I'm layering in filters after the fact. I often consider BuzzSumo to be Boolean light. If you are all familiar with that Boolean style of search, if you're not, I highly recommend doing even the most basic reading up on it. If you use Google a lot, just understanding some basic operators can vastly improve your experience when you're using any search engine. And BuzzSumo is definitely the same. You've seen me kind of use one probably of the most common Boolean style operators, which is the OR, which allows me to instruct our search engine to look for multiple terms in the same data set. There are other advanced operators that can further help you design a search that is useful. And those are all listed here under the search bar. So I'm just going to click this little drop down and you're going to see it open. You can see there's ways to eliminate terms by using a minus sign. There's ways to look for exact phrases with quotes. You can see you can even look for websites. I can actually focus more on a particular site rather than a topic. And then I can start to get really, really clever. I can start to look for things that combine topics and domains together by designing my search and then leveraging my filters. So there's so many clever ways to slice and dice content. Now, the last tip here is actually, I guess, a tip of something we are going to end on, that we're going to sort of wrap up the session here today, and that's using monitoring for niche keywords and topics. If you remember, that third use case that we talked about was more text analysis. We covered the three tools that are great for discovery and brainstorming. We covered the three tools that are really good for research and analysis. And you can see in each of these research and analysis tools, I should say, there's always this analysis tab. I would highly recommend kind of digging in here as well if you really want to start to get a picture of some of those insights that you pull out. So we won't kind of spend a ton of time on this right now. If you have further questions on, say, what these charts mean, please ask. They are one of the best parts of the research and analysis series of features. We did this search here that we were kind of being silly about finding, content about content marketing agencies in Ohio. And we got, 2 results, I think? Yeah. Now it's a little, in some ways, now that you know how these research tools are designed, it seems kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little silly for kind of searching for this. This is not really what this tool seems useful for. But there is a way where searching for something like this could be done, and it's at that text analysis level. Now we're moving away from thinking about the topics and the terms that articles are written about, and we're thinking more about just what terms are used in the body of articles. For those of you that do PR work, mentions probably comes to mind, or share a voice, or brand monitoring comes to mind. Yeah, those tools are all essentially text analysis. You're just analyzing text to find a mention of your brand. But if you apply that same logic to topics and keywords like we're doing here, you can actually monitor the text for anything, not just for mentions of your brand, but also for mentions of very, very specific keywords or very specific phrases or specific campaigns that you're running. When you have a more granular text analysis need, you're really going to want to set up some monitoring alerts to track those mentions. Here, the goal is not just to find all the top articles. The goal is to collect up as many possible instances where your terms are being used. So just knowing that, you can probably see where this would work really well and where it probably wouldn't. Probably a really great thing to do would be to use it to monitor. I'll give you a real specific example. I'm going to use keywords here. Probably a really good thing to monitor is something like this: affordable housing or design or new building. But that the article must also contain the term Colorado and architecture. I can do that kind of level of granular editing because I'm looking through the entire text of an article. Imagine putting all of this into the content analyzer we just worked with. We probably wouldn't find very much because we would be saying that every article had to mention affordable housing and architecture in Colorado, or design and architecture in Colorado. The results would probably be relatively limited. So if I really need to get granular, if I want to understand the content that's produced in geo-targeting a specific state or looking at its use in context, that's a good use case for monitoring. Probably not a good use case for monitoring is any mention of the term artificial intelligence or machine learning, ever. No matter where it's mentioned, what the context is, if artificial intelligence or machine learning is mentioned, I want to know about it. I shouldn't say it's probably not a good use case. Maybe you really do want to vacuum up all that data. But for me, 508 mentions today, and we're not even halfway through the day yet. By the end of the day, this is probably going to be over 1,000, and I'm going to be at a loss. What can I do with that data? How do I glean any kind of meaning out of it? I know it's a popular topic. So what am I really getting here? Text analysis is really about like digging into your topics in a more specific way. The real estate market is huge. I don't need mentions of every single article about real estate, but I might really want to focus on mentions of property values in London. I might not need to know every single mention of artificial intelligence or machine learning, but maybe I would want to know every mention of artificial intelligence or machine learning that also mentions Google, or that also mentions a particular company, or that mentions another keyword alongside that, like healthcare or cancer oncology or something like that. Monitoring, you see, can be really useful for long tail keywords, topics that just don't drive a lot of social engagement. I'm sure some of you might be working with a client, or maybe even your own brand, where you just say, it's just not, we just don't get a lot of social engagement. We mostly focus on traffic. Okay, that's fine. You probably still want to know, how often are your terms that you're trying to rank for being used? Are they being used in the right context? Or if not, you should know about it so you can get out and better educate the market. All of this is in service of leveraging this pillar content idea, understanding the entire category that we work in, identifying then where we're at in our content process, whether that be discovery, research and analysis, or text monitoring, and going and using the right tools to search for content that's going to be most relevant to help us build better content of our own, or curate and share content that our audience is going to be interested in. All right, with that, well, I guess let me give you one more thing before we go. If there's any questions, please drop them in the chat window, but I'll kind of give you one more thing to look at in monitoring as a couple of quick tips. Because it's text analysis, obviously with alerts, you have that ability to crawl the article text itself. So choose wisely, my friends, on what you, how specific, or I guess in the other way, I should say, how broad you set up an alert. If it's really broad, you're going to pull in a lot of data, and it might not all be relevant to your topic if you're just finding keyword matches. Get specific in your alerts. Case sensitivity and exact match phrases really, really matter here. It's okay for me to put artificial intelligence just as a topic to search for in the research tools, because we will go out and look for articles about those terms. But if you're just looking through the entire text of articles and you don't specify that artificial intelligence is the exact phrase, we'll find matches of artificial somewhere in the body and intelligence in the other, and that will create a false positive. So get specific. There are filters here, like you saw with the Colorado in architecture or Google, that allow you to further refine results. Setting up alerts is a lot about test, iteration, repeat. And the goal with alerts is really about recency. It's about forward crawling. It's not it doesn't fall into the research and analysis series of tools. It's much more about real time. So we will give you 30 days of content backfilled to work with, but then we're going to go out and crawl for new content. So use monitoring to uncover new content as it is published. And it looks like we got a couple of questions, which is awesome. So Lauren asks, how would you recommend leveraging data from the content analyzer to find industry influencers? Great question. I love this stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, because that's a really good workflow. So let's kind of pick any topic here. Let's go content marketing. Now, when I search for content marketing articles, I'm going to get, obviously, first and foremost, the engagement data. What are the articles that have driven the most amount of engagement over various periods of time? But the other thing that I get is I get information on the backlinks and the people sharing that content. This is really useful for understanding which specific articles have generated engagement with influential people. And this is a Twitter search, but really, really useful because we can pull this data directly down from Twitter. So here's the workflow. I searched for content marketing. I'm going to lessen my date range. I'm going to look, say, only over the past 6 months for more recent content. And I'm going to sort by Twitter shares instead of by total shares. How to research, monitor, and optimize for questions. Great article, great source, moz.com. Tons of Twitter engagement. I'm going to click the View Sharers button. What I'm going to do is get a list of all of the different people and profiles that share this, sorted by their social influence. How many average retweets they get when they publish a tweet. Now, obviously, Moz is going to publish and support its own content, so not surprising. But right down below, I start getting into all kinds of SEO and content experts, which, knowing the source of the article, isn't necessarily surprising, but really good to know that this is how they kind of rank in terms of influence with their audience. So Alita, AJ, MJ, Lee here, digital marketing, and so on. Once I start to identify these people, I can start to save them off to a list. It's like creating a little whitelist in BuzzSumo of influencers. You can see that the bookmark icon here is already colored in because clearly we've saved them before as influencers in the space. That is strategy number 1. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to give you one more strategy because it looks like we've got there aren't any other questions. So I got 2 more minutes. I'll give you one more strategy for doing this work. Instead of starting from the content section, now you saw that this workflow prioritized individual articles, which is great if you know exactly the type of article that you're tracking. Also really great for digging into an audience for a particular website that you compete against, are interested in, etc. I could just put in Moz here as a site and do the same thing, knowing that a Moz audience maybe would be my audience. Strategy number 2 is to actually just go to the influencer section itself and use search content shared. The content approach is about individual articles. The influencer approach is about topics and websites. Show me anybody who's shared any article about content marketing over the past 6 months. Again, it will still be sorted by that influence metric, that average retweet metric, but now it's not necessarily tied to just one article. It's all of the articles over the past 6 months. This would probably be your broad first step, search content shared. Not only will I get really, really powerful influencers, I'll also actually see what article they shared. I love when I see stuff like this because just the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gosh, so on, 6, 7, just keeps going. They're all sharing different kinds of content. And because I have information like their bios, the article they shared, their websites, I can start to paint a picture of what type of influencer is interested in what type of content. So I hope that gives you a couple of different strategies to leverage, Lauren. You saw here in the search content shared, I could also do it by domain. So if I'm more interested in knowing, who shared my content over the past 6 months or past month, that would be another useful way for you to dig into some of your biggest supporters right now that you might not even realize are really giving you a lift. All right, I think that's as good a place as any to call it quits for the day, high five, and send you off back to the rest of your work week. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you found this useful. If you're interested in the recording, do send me a follow-up. I'm happy to send it across to you. I never want to force people to have to listen to me again, but happy to send it off if you're interested. Yeah, it was my pleasure, Lauren. If you have questions that you didn't you forgot to ask or they sort of occur to you after this call has ended, click the icon in the bottom of any BuzzSumo screen. This is your portal to our support team, to our help center, to our webinar schedule, and to our data and reports that we publish. So do stay in touch. We love to hear about the different ways you're trying to use the platform and how we can improve it. So thanks again, everybody, for joining, and I will see you in BuzzSumo, I'm sure, in the near future. Bye.